You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, patrons, and welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And today we have, it's probably going to be interesting because it always is with this one fella here. Dave Wilson, you know him already. We've had him on before. We've talked about pizza, Jenny Wade, conspiracy theories, and a little bit of photography. Hello, Dave.
Hey, how are you?
Welcome. And also we have Rob Gibson, whose reputation precedes him. I'm sure you've all heard of him. But if you haven't, Rob is also a wet plate collodion photographer, like Dave. He used to have a studio here in Gettysburg, and you may see him now riding around on a motorcycle with a darkroom sidecar, which he calls the world's fastest darkroom. Rob, welcome to the show. Thanks for doing this.
Well, thanks so much, guys. Really an honor to be here, and can't wait to share some stuff with you. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. And then Eric, the producer, is sitting in for Bob today.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Pretty good. Let's get started here. So, Rob, you got. We'll start a little biographical stuff, and then we'll get into how it all works. You started with this type of photography in 1994. I think you said before.
Correct.
Did you have an interest in any type of photography before that?
Well, it's interesting how I got in this, actually, because previous to doing wet plate, I had never been into darkroom before. First darkroom I was in, I built. I was a Civil War reenactor. I started out doing artillery and quickly got into cavalry. Some people know me from the movie Gettysburg. I was one of Sam Elliott's staff officers, and did that whole gig and really enjoyed the heck out of it. And then I sort of got burned out on the whole reenacting scene. I was never one that was really that into shooting the guns and the tactics and all that, but was more into the time period. And literally had absolutely quit doing any Civil War stuff until one day in Rochester, New York, I was riding down a back road and I saw an old wagon for sale that was this Amish-looking contrivance that had the black tarred sides.
Yeah.
And I said, God, that looks like Matthew Brady's darkroom wagon. And that's it. That was literally the light bulb that went off. I thought, oh, my God, how cool would that be? I could, learn how to do photography, get this wagon, put it on a trailer, take it to events, set up a little cutlery thing. Didn't care if I made money. I had a full-paying job. But
what were you doing?
I was an engineer at General Motors.
Okay.
I went through an apprenticeship as a machine builder and repairman and then was working in engineering. And which was great because I had this highly technical side to me. Didn't know anything about photography, but thought, how hard could this be? You go out, you get a camera, you get a lens. There was no eBay. You went to every antique store in the world looking for this stuff. Once in a while, they had camera shows at some hotel that you would hear about second or third hand, and, you were hoping to find some bits and pieces. But I have to absolutely say it was the most difficult thing in my life that I ever attempted.
Learning how this all works.
Yes. And finally, I think the Holy Grail came is when I was in a little town in Olean, New York, and I found a little rare bookstore. And I happened to ask the guy, you got any books on Civil War photography? I'm thinking picture books, Matthew Brady, Alexander Gardner, that kind of stuff. He goes, well, I have one in the back, but it's very expensive. I said, well, I'd like to see it. And he pulled out this thing that looked like, the Shroud of Turin as he unwrapped it. It was just falling apart. And it was a formula book from the 1800s.
Oh, wow.
And it has all the guys' handwritten notes in it. And that was my start of learning how to do this kind of photography. I was fortunate in that I worked at General Motors at this large plant in upstate New York, and we had a chemistry department. So I would go into the chemist. I say, hey, what's this stuff here? He goes, well, I don't know. Now, these guys got master degrees in chemistry. And he'd go over, look through this huge thing, looked like a Bible, and look at these to find these old terms and how they were changed. Oh, that's this. And he'd pull some out. I go, can I have some? He goes, yeah, don't tell anybody, I'll get in trouble. And I'd go home and mix up some stuff, and I'd come back Monday. I said, man, I almost blew up the garage. That wasn't it. He goes, all right, try this then. And that's literally how I learned.
Yeah.
And then finally I went to George Eastman House, and they were offering a class, and that really jump-started things. But yeah, it was a lot of trial.
They were offering a class on wet plate or just photography in general?
It was Mark Osterman and his wife France, who still do an incredible job. They offer classes all over the world now. But actually, that was the first time I saw somebody pouring a plate, somebody, sensitizing, and suddenly all the stuff started to make sense.
Right, okay. So then you start going around to the reenactments and stuff. When do you open the studio across the street?
It was 1999, and actually there was 3 events that led up to it that were really instrumental in my life. The first one was I went to the Antietam reenactment. I think it was the 130th or 135th, the really large one. They had 22,000 reenactors, and business was great. I mean, I was turning people away. And there was a woman there doing, believe it or not, past life regressions. Okay. And I don't want to get into the whole thing there. That could be a whole nother show for you. But let's just say there was really some some real profound things that came from that.
Yeah.
And then I had gotten while I was there doing that event, film crew came through from PBS, and Rob Hodge was being featured on there, and he's like, well, let's go see Mr. Gibson and get a tintype done. And suddenly these guys are all in my tent, and I did the process and explained it all. And the woman who was the director was actually, we got all done. She says, you know an awful lot about this. Would you like to come talk at my museum? And I thought, well, yeah, that could be very cool. Yeah. And she says, I'm the director of the National Portrait Gallery of the Smithsonian. I said, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So a month later, I found myself in the courtyard of the Smithsonian in D.C. and doing my thing. And this older gentleman came around, and again, asking questions, taking photographs with a little Leica camera, everything I was doing. And he says, you know a lot about this. Would you like to come talk to my group? And I thought, oh, yeah, maybe he's like with the Lions Club or the Kiwanis or something. Right. He gives me his card. He's the president of the White House Press Photographers Association.
Really?
So within 60 days, it was PBS, Smithsonian, White House Press Corps, and I go, if there's ever been a sign that I'm supposed to be doing this, this has got to be it. Yeah. And that's when I decided to actually leave my job back in 1999 and build, my first studio here.
Now, I said across the street, but I don't think I mentioned that we're at Dave's studio, Victorian Photography Studios. I'm sorry, Dave. So that's where we're recording from today. So across the street from Dave's place on Steinway Avenue, Rob used to have his studio. And then at some point, though, you moved over here and built this studio that we're in now.
Correct.
Then what happened?
Well, I had moved over here because I saw an opportunity. This building wasn't being utilized.
What was it?
It was some sort of a strange gift kind of summery touristy thing.
Okay.
And I had known the people that owned the building, and I had a great space upstairs across the street at 65 Steinway Avenue. However, a lot of people didn't even know I was there because I had literally nothing more than a doorway going upstairs and a little shingle hanging out with my name on it. Where here, this was a 2-story operation. You had a lot more room for wardrobe, and there was parking in the back. There was a lot more opportunities here. So I came over here, and the one thing that was lacking here was the big skylight. I put the skylight across the street. It wasn't cheap, but it certainly paid for itself with the quality of the photography I was doing. Came over here, and while on the movie Gods and Generals, I had met a fantastic lighting man named Donnie Arrows, who does tons of work for every major motion picture and TV series out of D.C., Virginia area, and he taught me a lot about lighting. And Donnie and I had designed all the lights for these.
Yeah, I was gonna
put these in the daylight bulbs.
Yeah.
And created a space up here that worked really well.
Okay.
So, and Dave's certainly taking advantage of it now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't have minded a skylight, though.
No, the skylight was great. Yeah.
So, how long were you over here before you left?
Oh, I was over here for, let's see, a couple years. And then I had an opportunity down in Charlotte, and let's just say that sort of fizzled out, and I had gotten in a car accident, messed up my back. And some business things happened that, unforeseen things, and suddenly I was on the outside looking in. We'll just put it that way.
Okay.
And then decided it was time for me to come back and reclaim, my presence here in Gettysburg.
This place gets in your blood, though, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because I had the same type of story where I had a business here, I sold it, I left, and I was miserable. I don't know if you were miserable being away, but I was, and I finally came back, and I've been happy ever since.
Well,
nothing's improved otherwise.
Yeah,
but,
I think anybody that's into any kind of historical reenacting or the Civil War, this is the Mecca. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it certainly has a spirit about it that, you know, when I was a little kid, I begged my parents to take me here. I don't know why. My dad was not into history, and I had heard stories of my great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather that were both in the Civil War, fought cavalry troops. And I've got a great-great-grandfather buried in Cold Harbor, who got killed June 2nd down there. So, but there was no connection to Gettysburg, you know. They were all, always, in Virginia theater and that. But this place certainly has a spirit about it.
Yeah.
And I think there's those of us that are old souls. And, without getting too spiritual and everything else about it, but we're drawn to this.
Yes.
And, like it or not, love or hate the place, you can't help that you're drawn to this and to the time period.
No, you're right. I think it is it is a spiritual thing because I can't explain it. Because, for me, I grew up going to the Virginia battlefields. I have family down there.
Right.
And I like them, but it's nothing like when I came here, it was like this weird feeling I got, and I had to keep coming back.
Yes.
So it's a spiritual connection here that you don't get anywhere else.
No.
It's like indescribable, really.
Yeah.
The only other place I've ever had anything like that was Antietam.
Yes.
To me, I've got more of a connection there, even though I don't have any family connections at Antietam. For some reason, Antietam, for me, even the very first times I went in like first and second grade, there was just something like... I remember walking down the hill from the visitor center and just kind of stopping and looking around and like, it still looks like 1862 here. Nothing's changed. Nothing probably will.
Right. No, and that you're right. Antietam is another place like that, and then Harper's Ferry for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like all three of these places, I feel like I could be at home in.
It's that energy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had. It was the first year I was open, and that's where I started to sense that things were really different with what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And I think, and Dave can attest to this, the connection people have when you pour that plate, or I'm sorry, when you get done developing that plate and you fix it and the image comes up before you. I had a guy over, I had just got done working on Antietam video. I believe it still plays at the visitor center. Mm-hmm. That gentleman named Brad Graham had done over there. Yep. And I'm the photographer, and Kevin Rollins is Gardner. I'm James Gibson, who's, don't know if I'm related or not. But we had recreated that whole scene with the sunken road and rolling the bodies in. And then, you pan back, you see the photographer there, and then you see the original photograph. And it's,
I'm one of the bodies.
Well, there you go. I photographed Dave in a previous life, and I didn't even know it. Small world. It really is a small world. Yeah. But what had happened was I was back at my studio, and we had finally waited for finally a version of this that they handed out to those involved, and I had a VHS tape of it. And this guy comes up, and he said, "Are you Mr. Gibson?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I was supposed to see you." I says, "Okay, do you want a photograph?" What, he says, "Well, I live in Chicago." And he said, "I had to come down here. I've never been here before." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "And I'm an NDE." I go, "All right, I don't know what that is." And he says, "Near-death experience."
Oh.
He says, "I was a construction worker, and a scaffold collapsed, and this whole pile of scaffolding fell on me, and I was pronounced dead for a couple minutes." All right, so how can I help you? He says, "I've had this reoccurring dream. Ever since then, I've been just drawn to the Civil War. I had to come down here." And he says, "What is this sunken road?" And he's asked me about it. I go, "Oh, the sunken road in Antietam." Explain a little bit about what was happening there with the troops. And he says, "I see this dream, and I'm in this sunken road." And I says, "Oh, this?" And I clicked on the video, and it showed that scene with James Earl Jones narrating it, and they're rolling the bodies down the hill. And as you pan back, there I am behind my camera taking a picture, and suddenly he starts tearing up, and he goes, that's it. I was there. He said, I could see all that. I was walking around with a broken sword and all my men were dead. And he's going on and on and on. And I go, yeah, and I took your picture. And he just stopped cold and looked at me. And that's when I realized that, this place, you talk about that energy, it draws people like a magnet, like a lighthouse, and I don't know what's believable. I don't know what's true. Everybody has their own truth. All I know is that there's reasons why, it's certainly not financial. Why we're into doing what we do.
Hell no.
You know what I mean?
No.
It's because we absolutely love it, and you're trying to somehow cross that bridge of what is it between the past and us guys in the present that just are so drawn to this era.
When I decided that I was going to move back here, I was at a family function, and my father and my uncle were talking, and my father tells my uncle, oh, yeah, Matt's moving back to Gettysburg. And my uncle said to him, don't you think that's weird? And my dad's like, no, he loves it there. Why? He goes, yeah, it's weird, isn't it? He goes, why is it weird? Well, he's like, well, thousands of people died there. Like, why would he want to go to a place where all that horrible stuff happened? And so my father told me that story, like, isn't it kind of crazy that your uncle thinks this way? And I go, no, that's exactly why I want to go back there, because I was away for 8 years, and I couldn't shake it. I couldn't feel happy except for when I would come back and visit. And so my best friend was finally like, you just got to go back there. Just move back there. What the hell's keeping you here?
Right.
And he was right. But it's a thing you can't explain. So I figure I'll just live the rest of my life, and the day I figure it out is the day before I die. But so you got the studio over there, and but then you get rid of that, and then you move to the motorcycle, which kind of combines another piece of your past.
Right.
What kind of motorcycle is that anyway?
It's a 1950 Harley Davidson.
It is
what
a
they call
Harley.
Panhead, yeah.
Okay.
And then on its side is a 1938 Harley Davidson package truck, basically a delivery sidecar that I've converted to a portable darkroom.
Awesome.
You can Google it and see videos of me if you Google the world's fastest darkroom, videos will come up and you'll see different little feature articles, that kind of thing.
Okay.
It's funny, but from the creative side, I mean, if you're working specifically in a specific time period, it's I always tell people, when I stopped worrying about a date, then I started becoming much more creative. And they say, of course, well, what do you mean? I said, the date was 1865. Everything I did had to be before 1865 in my life to work for me. Mm-hmm. Whether it was the home I wanted to buy, whether it was, the camera I was using, and I use all original ones, or, that whole thing was, and I guess it was that reenacting background.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I got called to do something for a Harley Davidson place, and they wanted to shoot something with original clothing. So I had bought a book on Harley Davidson fashions. Now, Harley started, 1902, 1903. So, it went through the 20s and 30s, and you saw guys that were basically adapting work clothes to finally motorcycle clothes being made for them. So as I was researching this, I kept seeing these studio photographs of guys sitting on these bikes with these funky-looking sidecars that looked like little Amish buggies. Mm-hmm. Some looked like coffins, some looked like Amish buggies.
Right.
And found out quickly they were package trucks. And made it my mission to go find one, at least see one. And I happened to call a friend here locally. I won't mention his name because he doesn't like to be in the limelight.
Okay.
But let's call him Joe.
Okay.
All right? So I called up my buddy Joe, who's into old Harley. So I says, hey, Joe, you ever see these package trucks? He goes, yeah. I said, Joe, you got one? He goes, Rob, I got 9 of them. I said, really? Can I see one? He goes, yeah, but I'm not going to sell one. I said, all right. So I went over to his place, which is right on the outskirts of town here. And Joe had 9 of these package trucks. Most of them looked like coffins. Uh-huh. And then he had remnants of other ones. Ton of sidecars, hundreds of bikes, mostly all Harleys.
Right.
And so he knew what I did for a living. And he says, what do you want this for? And I told him. He goes, wow, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. I said, yeah, I know, it is pretty stupid. He goes, well, I wouldn't expect anything less from you. But he said, let me show you something. And we went to his barn, and we went up in the loft of it. And he says, I'll trade you those extra parts that you got, because I had some extra front ends and things from the bike I had bought for that. He said, that's a 1938 package truck. Box was disintegrated, but all the frame was there. All I needed was put a wheel on the damn thing.
Okay.
So that's how I got it. And then some very, very talented people. And Dave will tell you, you meet so many people from so many walks of life with special skills and talents. And you barter, you trade, you horse trade, you beg, borrow, and steal, and somehow you come up with stuff because sure don't have the money to pay for it. But Dustin Heisey, who's a lifelong friend and great reenactor and great historian, is also a fantastic carpenter. And he built the wooden box. We used all original specifications. And then down in Middletown, Maryland, a guy named Mark Main and I did all the metal work on it, bead rolled and everything else. I got all done with it, and it's like, man, this thing looks like $1 million, but it looks too new. The bike looked old and worn. So I said, I gotta, all my experience on movie sets, I said, I gotta patina this, I gotta make it look right. So again, somebody that's very talented, Marty Mummert, who does hand-painted signs, he's right over here across from the Gettysburg Library. He did all the lettering on there and said, Marty, how do we distress this? And he gave me some special tips that I won't share because they're his secrets, but that thing got done. I rolled that out of the garage. You swear it. People were like, oh, my God, where did you find this? Who's this Gibson guy? They saw the name on the side of it. They thought it was something from the 1930s.
Oh, okay.
That I just resurrected. I go, well, I know Gibson pretty well. It's me.
Yeah.
And we just built it.
Yeah.
So
the letterhead that you picked for it is just 100% perfect.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So that was it.
So now you just that's your studio now. You take that out everywhere.
I have a private studio that I'll use for small shoots, ones and twos. I can't do anything like Dave does in here, accommodate big groups and all that. But I do more private little stuff, and I just moved into a space in Gettysburg that allows me to do that.
Oh, cool.
And but my biggest clientele is out on the road, and it's been certainly very, very hard this last couple months because I had 12 events cancel. Mm-hmm. So
what type of events are you doing now?
Motorcycle stuff, car shows, photography demos, school groups, motion pictures. So I do a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
And most of the stuff is some sort of a rolling demonstration whether it's school groups or I was down to doing something down the Chautauqua group down there near Deep Creek, Maryland. We were supposed to do one. And also, reenactors, steampunk, all that sort of stuff. A lot of antique car show. What's great is that I think I'm bridging that gap where the great thing about photography, especially prior to World War II, is it was professional, but it was also something that crossed all genres. It didn't matter if you were into old cars, old airplanes, ships, everything got photographed.
Yeah.
So now I'm trying to put myself where there's people that are passionate about, these things they own or restore. And there's a clientele that's going to go, you know what? I got $100,000 into this antique car. What's another $100 to get a cool looking tintype?
Yeah, exactly. No, I love them. I think they're fascinating, and they seem to be big with hipsters and these steampunk people, and
just about. There's kind of an online revolution now of wet plate photography, and it's as Rob was saying earlier, we kind of get stuck so much in the historic process of it, keeping everything completely period. There's ways of making tintypes where you can use, a cloth or canvas darkroom out of, modern materials. You can use flash bulbs. You can pre-order chemicals. Like, it's gotten easier.
Yeah.
And we order aluminum. We don't have to Japan our own tin.
Get in.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Since the 1860s, it's never been easier to get into wet plate.
If you guys wanted to, you could go on a website right now and for like $600 buy like a chemical starter kit. And everything that you need is already there.
And you can build a camera. You just have to find the lenses, right?
Pretty much find a lens. Yeah.
Now there's somebody even selling those. I found out.
Yeah. They're making them.
Formula new lenses. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Even for Nikon DSLR cameras, a couple years ago, they were making a brass Petzval lens.
Oh, really?
That you put on there with drop-in manual apertures and everything. Wasn't great.
Okay.
A couple of people bought them right off the bat. Spent
for the look.
Yeah, for the look mainly. It's pretty cool to have that big brass lens on there. But a buddy of mine brought one in here, and the focal length on them is real strange. We were back against the wall to even just get like a 3/4 portrait.
Okay.
So it was the effect was cool, but you can get that effect now with portrait mode on an iPhone 11.
Yeah,
so like
yeah.
it's not worth sinking money into it.
See, that's the thing is that with your phone or Photoshop and all these digital things that you could do, you can mimic this, but it's not the same as having it actually done.
I've yet to find a purely photoshopped wet plate or tin type that within a couple seconds I'm like, oh no, that's
how I could always tell is like everything is too crisp.
Right. There's no
like,
depth. Yeah.
No, there's no depth, and what's even when there is depth, what's in focus is too in focus.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can fake the fallout, you can fake the vignetting.
Yeah, but they don't do it.
What they can't seem to fake, and this is where to the novice, what they don't understand. Our plates are what they call orthochromatic.
Okay.
So they react to the light differently than, let's say, black and white film.
Yep.
You look at the pictures of World War II and you compare it to the pictures of World War I, and there's a distinct difference. The difference is Panchromatic Film comes out in the 1930s, and that's what everybody switches to. You look at Charlie Chaplin in an old silent movie, and he's got this funky looking makeup on, so he doesn't look washed out, and well, why does it look different? Why? And that's the biggest thing is that now they created a more light sensitive film base that reacted to the light more realistically, even though it was still black and white, than the previous 1860s orthochromatic. So even though they came out with dry plate in the 1880s, they came out with sheet film, turn of the century, World War I, that was still all ortho. And it wasn't until, like I said, the 1930s where you start to see this pan film, which is much more realistic in the way it renders light. So we're shooting this old ortho stuff. You get a guy with light blue eyes, he looks like a wolf.
Right.
That's the biggest difference.
Yeah.
Or somebody with a red shirt or red pants, they come out dark,
Yep,
or
exactly.
freckles or red hair.
Right.
Yeah.
So for the sake of the audience, clearly not me, but the audience who might not know these things, when you say ortho, and explain to everybody what happens. I guess let's start with the wet plates and then work our way through to film.
Okay.
We don't need digital, but through to film. What happens chemically on these different mediums? Is medium the right word?
Yeah, I'll start it. So basically the collodion is reacting to different kinds of light, and there's different ranges of sensitivity. So regular daylight, which we see, ultraviolet light, it's a very bluish purple, and that's what it's made to react with. The bromide and iodide salts. When you're making this collodion, I don't want to get way too into the depths of exactly which chemicals you put in, but you're making what's called a salted bromo-iodized collodion. Instead of just being like a gelatin film to hold the silver nitrate, there's also photographic properties in it as well too. The cadmium bromides, potassium iodides, ammonium iodides. You can put all kinds of stuff in there. I've got a book from 1864, and it's probably got 40, 50 different collodion recipes, and they're for all kinds of different stuff. But mainly what you're looking to do is capture the best light, and it has close to zero sensitivity to red light, almost no sensitivity at all to yellow light, and white light's this weird like in between. But then when you skew into the blue light, that's where it's really picking everything up. So when you're developing, your developer is a glacial acetic acid and ferrous sulfate. It's developing the white, the blue colors, the white colors real fast. They pop up real quick, and your reds, your sometimes yellows, a lot of colors that are flat that don't reflect light real well. Like if you have a red satin, it'll pop up and you'll get more tone to it than if you have red wool or red velvet. Red velvet might as well just be black.
Right.
It's going to be dead, just flat.
Because that doesn't
matte.
reflect light. Is that why?
No, yeah, it doesn't reflect light hardly at all.
So imagine the color spectrum, the rainbow, if you will,
Okay.
squished. That's what it is.
Okay.
You don't have these very distinct differences between, the upper end of the color spectrum and the lower. It gets muddy. You're probably the most neutral of color would be green, which is what they would recommend that you wore into the studio. I like photographing people in darker things. I see a guy in a white shirt, I'll say, put a jacket on. Yeah. Why? Because you're going to look huge. Whether you are or not, that white is going to pop.
Same with gray hair. Gray hair just pops
White
out,
hair,
shock white.
Look at Robert E. Lee.
Yeah.
Robert E. Lee looks like an old man. He was 55, 56 years old during the Civil War. You know, he didn't look that old in person. The biggest thing I hear is that, why does everybody look so haggard? They led such a hard life. And no, it's a process.
Yeah.
This is not glamour photography.
Right.
You know, a lot of, I'll tell you, my hardest, when I was in the studio, my worst client, I don't want to say worst, but the most critical client was middle-aged women. Because it's not a pretty process.
No.
You know, they look at it and go, oh, well, I look harsh.
I know.
It happens.
That's the process.
Some cameras add 10 pounds. Our cameras add 100 years. It just
exactly.
It finds every line in your face. It finds every blemish.
Yeah.
If you're
no, they find them.
Oh yeah.
The women find them,
That
not
too.
the pictures.
Well, and I always tell people, like, wear the littlest amount of makeup as you can, because if you're covering something up and you don't cover it correctly, you're going to look even more blotchy.
Yeah, because you're looking at the reflectivity of a lot of that stuff too.
Yeah.
And that's where you're seeing. You know, I've had people go. You see so many of them. All you got to do is look on eBay. The worst thing, of course, is this is a postmortem photograph because it's some guy with blue eyes.
Yep.
It's like, no, he's not dead. He's looking at the camera. He's got light blue eyes. And even though he looks like a vampire, he's very much alive. I'm not saying there's not postmortem photographs.
Right.
It's certainly, an area of collecting images. But you can really tell some of the child look like they're asleep, okay, but they don't look like zombies. You know what I mean?
No,
they look
no.
like dead people.
They look like dead people.
And they're
Children
laying
are hard
down.
enough
They're
to
not-
pose anyway.
They're not
Yeah.
seated around them with their buddies hugging them, smoking cigars. One of my favorite stories is a guy that founded the Center for Civil War Photography with me, Al Benson. He was helping me at the studio. I went down to his house one time. He had this great old house down in Danville, Virginia, and he was into the Civil War, but he was in collecting all kinds of photographs, and his walls were literally covered with tons of photographs all the way up to World War II. And he invited his neighbors, who weren't the most educated people, to a party at his house. And this one guy walked around with a can of beer in his hand. He's looking at all these old photographs. He goes, Al, who are these people? Are these relatives? You're like, oh, no, this is my collection. This is Civil War, and this is, World War I, and this and that. He goes, well, what's with all these people? And it was a whole wall of postmortems. And he goes, well, those are postmortems. The guy says, well, what's that mean? He says, it means they're dead. And the guy spun his head around the room to look at the rest of the picture. He says, well, aren't all these people dead? So, yeah, but these were dead when they took the picture. That was the difference.
So, when you watch an old movie a movie that takes place in the West, and they've got the flash pan there,
yes.
That wasn't around during the Civil War, right?
No.
Nope.
I think, is it 1868? Timothy O'Sullivan takes the first indoor phosphorus flash.
They were burning magnesium strips and doing all kinds of wild stuff, trying to speed up the process. Yeah.
And did it? Well, I mean, it just seemed to me like does that work?
It doesn't so much with collodion.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can light things, but the flash is not like you see in the cowboy era. What happens is the dry plate era comes about after the Civil War.
Rob, just
manufacturers start creating glass plate negatives in a factory.
Okay.
And through chemistry, they're able to increase the sensitivity of the plates. So by the cowboy era, two big things happen. Number one is these plates are dry. You no longer are racing to the darkroom to develop it before it dries. Okay. So that means you're walking around with a satchel with multiple plate holders, a camera, and a tripod, instead of all of that plus
a dark
a
room
wagon,
and water,
chemistry, and
all that
water,
other extra
and
nonsense.
a million other things that Dave and I carry. The other thing that happens is because they have perfected this chemistry, that they can make it much, much quicker. So now they're taking photographs in 1/10 of a second rather than 10 seconds. So that means the cameras needed some sort of a shutter apparatus, usually some sort of a roller blind shutter, but also that if they added flash to it, fill flash, they could blast the subject with light, which was somewhat blinding for, a fraction of a second, but allowed them to shoot a much, much quicker shutter speed. So now you actually start to see some sort of almost on the edge of motion photography too.
Okay.
You can almost catch candid photos now,
right?
Whereas every photo before then is very posed. It's very set up,
right?
And it also kind of depends a little bit on your light too. There's photos of like the Grand Review in 1865.
Right.
It had to have been just the brightest, sunniest day because there's guys moving forward in line, and this photographer must have just open, close, done, and caught them. They're very blurry, but you can see them.
Yeah.
If it had been an overcast day, you might not have any photos of the Grand Review.
But it would just been a bunch of ghosts or something.
Probably just an empty street.
Well, I think this was around 1900 though, or maybe a little earlier. I don't know. But the famous horse running.
Yeah,
Muybridge.
Yeah.
Edward Muybridge.
When was that?
I think what was it, like 1878, 1880s?
It sounds.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Because those were little mousetrap cameras he had.
Okay, so this is what I'm getting at. Yeah.
And I think there was some sort of a bet where they betted that the horse ran.
Never.
There was always some foot was on the ground.
1 foot on the ground. Yeah.
It was never
he said
with all feet
he's
off.
leaping. And to settle this bet, he created a series of cameras that were all one-shot cameras. And as the horse ran through, he broke a string and fired a shutter on each one of them. And it must have been a ton of trial and error before he finally got that done.
Yeah.
But, and then he was able to do a whole series of these photographs of basically what we call burst mode. Wasn't anywhere near as fast.
Yeah, our iPhones can do it now. You just hold the button and it's good.
It's amazing.
Yep.
But so what was the camera? What did you call it?
They were like what they call. Well, Talbot's wife used to call these little cameras he'd made, which were wood with nothing more than a simple lens, mousetraps, because they look like little wooden.
Okay.
Rectangular box, yes,
yeah,
with a lens on the front, and they put it. Muybridge put, I believe, they were dry plate negatives in the back.
Okay,
and again, they were super sensitive. I don't know if he had blasts of light going off with that or anything. I don't know of any flash that was with it.
Yeah,
because the background seems so bright.
Yeah,
like
wasn't it white?
Yeah, it's a white back. Yeah.
To show distance or whatever. Yes.
Huh. And so that's kind of like, I think I remember learning about that when I took a film class in college. So that's like the precursor to the motion picture.
Right.
That whole thing.
And when you think about it chemistry-wise, and people are really blown away by this, they came out with ways to make pictures move before they came out with ways to make pictures in color.
Yeah.
Color was tough.
Yeah.
It was really tough.
All right, so then let's move on to celluloid then. So when we jumped from the plates to film, when does that happen and who gets that idea?
Well,
do you know that?
I know George Eastman is credited for most of that. If he wasn't the one that invented it, he was certainly the one that put it in the hands of consumers.
Okay.
Eastman did wet plate, and he was, what I hear, pretty frugal guy. Good way of calling him cheap. Okay. And one time he went on an excursion. He had a steamer trunk with his clothing in it and his wet plate chemistry. Arrived by train. They tossed the steamer trunk off the train, and he was off to the country to do some shots. Realized the silver bath had broke and ruined all his clothes. And they said that was the moment where he said, this sucks. There's got to be something better than carrying all this silver and everything else. And that's where he really worked on the dry plate, and it was the Eastman dry plates that became the first real consumer multi-made glass plates. There was other people doing it. I'm not saying he was the first one, but he perfected it.
Right.
And then eventually gelatin roll film. And what that does more than anything is puts cameras in the hands of amateurs. It wasn't that big a deal when it came to quality. The quality was nowhere as good as glass plates were of the era. It was the convenience. It's just like digital cameras aren't today compared to... Pros were still using, 35 millimeter or medium large format film cameras. And back then people said there's no way this film stuff is ever going to take the place of glass plates. The same thing I heard in the late 1990s, 2000s. Digital stuff is cool, but it's never going to take the place of film, So it's always that any advance in photography becomes a convenience, and quality is caught up. So, and the pros are always the last to change.
It's funny with digital, because I used to do videography, and it was all basically we all used DSLRs. We just put it on the video mode, and they made cinematic looks and things like that. But everybody was always trying to figure out how to manipulate it in post to look like it was film.
Right.
Because nothing beats film.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, when film is new, everybody's like, well, nothing beats wet plate.
Right. It's funny. I worked on a film last year. Your audience might enjoy this, called Harriet.
Oh, yeah.
So it was the story of Harriet Tubman. And John Toll, who was the cinematographer, who has got a spectacular record. He's, I think, won Academy Awards for Legends of the Fall and Braveheart.
Those are
Did
great,
all the cinematography for
Legends
both of
of
those.
the Fall is great for
And
cinematography.
he says, Rob, he says, you like camera stuff. He says, I watched you do your thing. Come on in here. So he has this black pop-up tent on the set, and we're outdoors in a field in Virginia, Berkeley Plantation we were shooting, and it was all blacked out. So you walked in, and here was this darkened room in the middle of a field, and here was this huge console with these great big large screen monitors and a control board that looks like something I saw in the 70s as a concert watching like Led Zeppelin or somebody, you know, with all these sliders and everything else. And he is monitoring what they're shooting out there and, I don't want to say editing it, but tweaking it,
marking it
in live time, you know, in real time, where he's adjusting the contrast, you know, and everything else, and it was the most spectacular image I ever saw projected on a screen there. He said these are state-of-the-art Sony Venice cameras, and he says at the time I think they were one of the first ones to use something like that, and it was just such a beautiful image. And that's where, you know, here I am lugging my old wooden camera, you know, with brown stains all over my hands, and you see where this has come from and to. And you think, you know, as spectacular that is, there's still a place for this old crap that I'm carrying, you know?
Well, that's the thing is it looks cool. Like, you know, I was looking through your pictures here, and frankly, it's amazing that these were taken like today. A couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
Because now there's, for the audience who obviously can't see them, but there's old motorcycles in there, like Indian motorcycles and old race cars and things from the 30s era,
some of those date
like
back, 20s, 30s, up
and the trains and those steam engine
1800s.
things. Yeah, those are freaking awesome. But they look like it's just a collection of genuine old photographs that you found,
right?
But you took them in the 21st century. So that, I think, is what's cool about it. Is like sometimes I've seen some pictures that you've posted, Dave, on Instagram and stuff, and I guess it would be these steampunk people when you see like the trappings of the modern day or just, you know, something, but the style of the tintype looks cool. It just makes everything look cooler,
right? And it's like
it makes me look fat, and I wish you and I could work on a slimming angle.
We can work on angles next time.
Get out the skinny lens.
Just have a girdle in the back for me.
I've got plenty of corsets. We can tie in.
Whatever works. But for everybody else, they look great. And but you were saying,
I don't remember what I was saying.
You we're talking about just how it looks cool. It makes everything look cool, and you see something modern.
Well, this past weekend, and like Rob was saying, how immobile our style, and I'll watch other just DSLR photographers just wander around, throw their stuff in their car, shoot, do their thing. And I had a shoot on Sunday at the Capitol Ruins in Rock Creek Park.
Oh, those looked awesome.
It's a cool spot. I didn't know anything about this place, but apparently in the 1950s when they refurbished the Capitol, they stripped like the whole facade off of there, and they're like, well, where do we put it? And so they just dumped it in Rock Creek Park. Wow. And they labeled everything, but there's stones from 1818 back there. There's facade that's seen the inauguration of every president from Jackson to Eisenhower just hanging out in the park. And
what are they, back in the woods?
Yeah, they're kind of just so this is what I'm getting to. My client said, well, yeah, we're in DC, where do you want to meet? I said, well, I'm going to be near Rock Creek Park. They said, oh, we know a place back there. And I didn't even think to ask if it was near anywhere to park, because I usually just shoot out of the back of my Subaru. Right. And they said, yeah, there's parking there. It's it's not far. It's like, okay, all right, we'll see. They're like, it's a 5-minute walk. I'm like, ugh, that's a lot to haul a darkroom, and it's down a horse trail. So there wasn't even like a path. It was just like rumbly. So fortunately, I brought a wheelie cart, but like, I got my workout just pushing. I was like, and that was one of those. It's one of those moments you're like, why do I do this? Like, I could have picked any other medium to shoot in. But then you get there, you set up, you take the first shot, and then you draw a crowd. And
Yeah.
people are like, what's this? You're really shooting on that? That really works?
Yeah.
And you shoot these pictures and like you can't replicate
Right.
it. There's nothing
there's
better.
no mechanics to it. It's science.
It's a box
It's all
and a lens,
chemistry,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
It is. There's no shutter. There's nothing you press. You just take the lens cap off, and then magic happens.
Yeah, and
that's why it's
all
so
the magic
cool.
of it is the chemistry. People always
right.
follow me to the camera. They want to watch the photos, and there's nothing cool
There's
that
nothing to
happens
see.
here. It's me
Right.
opening and closing. You want to meet me by the dark room.
Right.
That's where you get to see the fun stuff.
I tell people it's a perfect combination of history, technology, and art.
Yeah.
All wrapped in one. What I love about wet plate photography is it's the least amount of technology between me and the subject. If I was a painter or a sketch artist, I'd be doing that. But this is okay. It's a photo mechanical process, if you will. That I'm creating images with the sun.
Yeah.
And
right.
it was funny because if you study the history of photography back in the 1840s, when Daguerreotype first came about, 1839, Louis Daguerre makes his announcement, and people start seeing these images. All of a sudden, painters are scared to death. What the hell are we going to do? How can we possibly compete with these paintings by the sun? And it was a band of French artists got together, I'm sure, after drinking a lot of the absinthe and sitting in some little cafe, and they said, you know what? We have to do what they can't do. We have to do more color. We have to evoke more feeling in our images and stop worrying about trying to make them so darn realistic. Let's make them more interpretive.
Oh, okay.
That's where French interpretive painting comes from,
All right.
So, the whole Monet and all that stuff. Direct result of photography.
Yep.
That's interesting. So they were all threatened by it at first, but then it just caused them to change, to
and
adapt.
Daguerre was an artist. I mean, his whole thing was, I'm bugging these rich people with them having to pose for me for their portraits. If I could capture them, now I can take that likeness back to my studio and paint it.
Right.
And then once you realize what he had, he's like, well, the heck with the brushes.
Sure.
This is an art in itself.
Yeah. And you could do several clients in a day, maybe. How long how long did he have to sit back then?
For
if you were sitting for a portrait.
Or
no,
photography.
Photography.
I mean, at first it was minutes.
Minutes.
I mean, people, you read it in the Civil War stuff all the time. Historians that don't know the process say, "Oh, and they had to sit sometimes a half an hour for a portrait." No, it was less than 10 seconds. Alexander Gardner, May 26, 1863, in the advertisement for his Washington D.C. gallery says, "Carte de visite likenesses taken in less than 10 seconds, and on clear days, like 3 seconds."
Yep.
So it was much, much, much quicker. It was still a pain in the butt process, but the exposures weren't ridiculous.
Well, because I've always heard that, they got to sit there for 60 seconds. But every time I've done with you, it's never been more than 10 seconds.
Now, you may be... It takes a while to get yourself posed.
Well, yeah.
The whole time that you're seated for the picture, I've had people sit for maybe 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah, but you're not
as
holding
far as the
still.
exposure time, rarely over 15 seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize, too, is the importance of the quality of the light. It's not just the amount of light. First of all, and Dave will attest this, you can't take photographs with modern photographic light. You need daylight. You need 6,500 degrees Kelvin temperature to react to the chemicals.
Right.
So forget about normal flash, forget about just indoor lighting, that kind of thing. But the other thing is that as the seasons change, the amount of sunlight not only diminishes, but your color temperature does too.
Changes, yeah.
So a lot of studios in the Northern Hemisphere close down during the winter. You don't see photographs, particularly in Canada, in the wintertime. I know of one Civil War photograph taken, I think it's Guisborough, at a remount camp of cavalry where you actually see snow.
I was just going to say, that's the cavalry guy, and there's snow in the
Correct.
background. Yeah,
Yep, that's it. Yep, that's about the only one I know. There's
I've got
hardly any. Yeah.
I've got a reenacting group that wants me to come out to their January camp every year. I'm like, you don't see original photos
Right.
in
I was gonna
January
say, now
camps.
that I'm thinking about it.
I'm not going to take them either.
Yeah.
A lot of these chemicals have temperature points that are
Right.
much different than water.
So what would happen if you went and did try to take a picture
Probably not
in
much.
January?
Well, I'll tell you,
So
I
you wouldn't get
did
anything.
I worked on a movie called Into the West.
Oh yeah.
And we were actually filming up in the Sahara Nevadas. And the director says to me, all right, we're going to be up there. Can you do a photograph? And it was like the gold rush era, that kind of thing. And there was snow on the ground. I'm like, dude, you got to get me somewhere, keep these chemicals warm. The developer will freeze at 40 degrees. I said, plus I got the collodion has to evaporate, the ether and alcohol in the collodion to create that film when I pour the plate. So I'm standing there. God, lucky I didn't blow up. The things you do, the crap you do for a movie to say, yeah, I'll get the job done.
I know.
I'm standing there next to this huge heater, right? Just pumping heat like crazy in this tent. And it's like, okay, shut it off. We shut it off. I pour a plate really quick and try to get that to evaporate as quick as I can. Get into the silver, which at one point had like a snowy or like icy slush, like a silver slushy I was using. And took some great pictures, but without that heater, there was no way I could do that.
Right.
If that stuff was, if I had went up there on horseback, that stuff would have been frozen solid. I had a modern vehicle with a heater in it, and I had this warming tent. But they turned out good for that. But the exposure times were slow, and particularly the setup time for that thing to evaporate enough that you could immerse it in the silver was really tough.
So the reason we don't see a lot of winter shots from back then is because you couldn't get a good shot.
Chemistry.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It was tough.
And the light's not
tough.
great either. Even here in the winter, my exposure times go up a couple seconds.
You mean in the studio?
Yeah. In the studio.
And you've got
the
these
lights don't really change here, but the light coming in isn't worth anything.
And that makes
and
all
in
the
the summer,
difference.
I mean, it can be slightly overcast, and I'm still getting quicker.
Can you add more lights
I could
in the
add
winter
more light
to
in
make?
here, but there comes to a point where once you've added so much artificial light, you really don't get the same tones.
No, and you see so many of that in these guys that are doing wet plate. Particularly, it seems to me like a lot of European guys are doing it that are using either all flash or harsh lighting. I mean, it's harsh.
Yeah.
To me, it looks like a
strobe is the new
white.
way to do it.
But isn't that
black
like a
and white
style they're trying to go for? It's like a mix of old
I think
and
that's
new.
all they can get.
I think for a lot of these people, Rob and I are some of the few that can actually get the period chemicals. There's only a handful of us who are using actual potassium cyanide as a fixer,
right?
And there's a lot of people who are using
sodium thiosulfate.
Yeah. There's a lot of
and that's safety concerns, and obviously for obvious reasons, So a lot of these people are getting into it just as a hobby, and there's been horror stories, as with anything, you're dealing with dangerous chemistry.
Well, yeah.
I was fortunate in that before I started doing this, one of my jobs, General Motors, it was funny. I was a mechanic, but I was like, oh, yeah, I'll join the fire brigade. Yeah, I'll be an EMT on the ambulance crew. And sure, I'll join the hazmat crew. So as part of that, I was a New York State certified hazmat technician.
Okay.
So I knew the dangers of this stuff. And I'll tell you, to this day, it still freaks me out working with it. I have incredible respect for it.
Yeah.
And especially when you're with the public, who is...
all the
very
time.
strange at times,
just lovely, right?
Yeah.
I remember when Dave was showing me the first time, like how this all works and everything. And before he showed me, I had an interest. Then I heard the word cyanide, and I said, "Forget that. I don't want to have."
Right.
I wanted to learn how to do it.
I
But
think
that's
you would
like,
also ask me about Daguerreotype too, and
mercury.
That's even, 10 times worse. You're boiling iodide. You're boiling mercury. You're getting the mercury vapors airborne.
Now,
there's a lot that goes into that.
You know the Mad Hatter,
yes,
right? And then the Mad Hatters from the chemicals and everything they use. I never heard of the Mad Photographer, but it sounds like there was plenty of opportunity.
One of the reasons they believed that Brady went blind was years of doing daguerreotypes.
Oh, really?
I mean, his eyesight was so bad. The way he got killed is he walked out in front of a horse cart, got run over by a horse, and then he convalesced at his nephew's house. Handle 11, I think is who it was.
How old was he when he died? Young guy?
He was in the
70s, something like that.
Oh, he was old.
Older for that era.
Yeah.
Probably like in his early 70s, I think.
That.
But silver nitrate, if you get it in your eyes, you'll go blind. And if you work with mercury long enough, it'll mess with your blood. And he did both mediums. He did daguerreotype for so long.
Terrible.
Yeah. I guess you don't quite hear so much of the mad photographers because daguerreotype really only had like a 10-year span.
Right.
And by the time 1849, when wet plate collodion comes out, the shift is
quick.
It's quick. Everybody realizes this is cheaper,
It's
this
also
is easier, and I can do it better in the field.
It's more predictable, and I can make multiple images from one glass plate.
Right.
That was a big advantage.
That's the
customer
biggest,
wanted that.
Yep.
They wanted those newfangled paper prints.
Okay.
Well,
And then the tintype sort of came by as a as the bastard child of wet plate.
Right. Brady figured out right away that like you can only get so many people to come through your display. If you're showing at a museum, only a handful of people can come through your exhibit. But if you take that one glass plate and you make hundreds, thousands of copies, they can go everywhere.
Right.
Correct.
And then you can really get that's how you make money. And so Brady figures out real quick that he can pay other people to shoot glass images for him. He'll buy their negatives and then make the reproductions and sell those. So there's a lot of Brady images that are plates that Brady bought.
Okay.
Pirated and stolen from others.
Yeah. Copyright hadn't quite caught up yet.
He was a Napster of the 1860s.
He absolutely was. Absolutely.
So I guess Mad Photographer doesn't have the ring that Mad Hatter does.
Yeah. And that was from boiling the animal pelts with mercury to loosen it up to create the felt for beaver hats.
It's amazing. Well, you mentioned the movies. Let's get talking about that because you've done a lot of things in movies. You mentioned you were one of Buford's staff officers in Gettysburg, but you also did wet plate photography for Gods and Generals.
Correct. Yep.
And you mentioned Into the West.
See, I worked on Gods and Generals.
How'd you get into that?
Just by sheer determination.
Okay.
I went down there. A good friend of mine, Mike Wickline, was doing the EPK. Well, it wasn't EPK then. It was just the background making of film video. Okay. And he kept saying, you got to get Rob Gibson down here. It's amazing. So he kept bugging him. And this is before we even started filming. And I was lucky enough to meet a gentleman named Vic Heiche, who was the director of publicity for, who was that? It was Turner Pictures that did that. I'm trying to think, was it Paramount? Well, anyhow.
Okay.
Vic was a real old school Hollywood guy. I mean, the people he knew and everything else, and he saw something very different, in what I was doing. He believed in me. He said, all right, Rob, here's what it is. We ain't going to pay you. You can come down here and you take any pictures you want. I said, all right, here's my side of it. Any pictures I take, I will give you. You can use whatever you want in the film, use them for PR, whatever. However, I retain rights to them. I said, all right. So when the film wrapped, I was able to produce a book from it, but I was also able to provide tintypes, glass plates, and prints for the reenactors that were involved and for the actors. I can't tell you how many times, Stephen Lang and I would go to a corner somewhere and do a portrait of him.
Yeah.
He really loved the medium, and we're still friends to this day.
Sure.
So that got my foot in the door. And then I got called to work on Cold Mountain, and Cold Mountain was filmed in Romania. I got my passport, got all set to go. And finally they said, all right, here's what we're going to pay you a day. And it was literally peanuts. And I said, look, I know Nicole Kidman's getting millions. You can't give me X amount a week,
Yeah.
And they couldn't, or they didn't want to. I don't know which it was. So they had hired somebody else.
They were giving it to Jude Law.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the prop master called me up and said, Rob, I love your work. I need your photographs in this movie. And he said, we're doing a scene with Nicole Kidman where all these images of missing or dead soldiers are on a wall. I think it was a store or a church. I can't remember. And she walks into the scene and is looking for a picture of Jude Law. So these are all friends of mine. I recognize every one of those in that film. They're guys I just got to, to say, all right, you're doing this, I think it was North Carolina Regiment, dressed this way. We'll, do you up. And some were civilians taken before the war, supposedly. And the funny part about that was you can look on the film, you see all these images. Years later, I get an email from somebody that's a guy on eBay. He said, I bought this picture, and I believe you took it. And I go, okay. He goes, well, I bought it from a Hollywood auction, and these are supposed to be authentic Confederates. And I said, well, let me see the picture. I recognized right away who the guy was, a buddy of mine. I go, oh, yeah, I took that. And he goes, well, this guy is listing all these pictures. So I go over to the guy's eBay site, and I go, oh, here's my buddy Spiros, here's Rush Richards, here's this one, here's that one.
That just happened not even a month ago. Yeah. Somebody bought a picture of John Heckman that you took.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And they think they're original,
Yeah.
And I contacted this guy on eBay. I says, hey, buddy, these aren't old. These are my pictures. He's like, No, I got these from a Hollywood auction. These were all used in the movie Cold Mountain. I go, I took them.
Who do you think
for the movie? They weren't about to buy original Confederate images and hang them on the wall. And he was not happy because he had paid thousands for them. Him and another guy got in a bidding war. Both thought they were original, and he was in good faith selling them, thinking he's going to make money.
Yeah.
So that was the Cold Mountain story. But let's see. I worked on Gods and Generals, Cold Mountain, Into the West. We talked a little bit about that. Assassination of Jesse James, Brad Pitt film.
Doing wet plate? Or
yes, and this was what was interesting. It was supposed to be a dry plate picture.
Okay.
Right? So the director says, first of all right, you're going to take a picture of Brad Pitt, dead Brad Pitt, Jesse James, right? Okay, so I got the call sheet. I'm at the hotel. I call my prop master, and I says, Brad's off. He's not even in town. How the hell am I supposed to take a picture of him? It's like, we got a dummy. I said, you're kidding me. He goes, no, we got this mannequin, Rob. You're going to freak out. It's awesome. I'm thinking, come on, how good is this thing, right? So they take me to this warehouse up in Vancouver, Canada, and they got this thing on an embalming table, and they cranked this table up so he's standing upright. I swear to God, it was the most incredible looking mannequin likeness thing I've ever seen. Really? Scared the hell out of you. I mean, they took a life mask and chest of him, all in latex.
Okay.
And then literally, you could look up his nose and see hairs in his nose. Really? That's how accurate the thing was.
Wow.
Because they said, well, we need him for this scene. He can't. It's going to take 8 hours to film the scene.
Right.
So he's got to lay there. So I ended up taking a picture of this mannequin, showed it to the director. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah? Yeah, it's too good. You got to take something crappy looking. It's like, well, this is 1880, whatever the date was that Jesse James got killed. And this was dry plate. It was a good quality. I don't care.
Yeah.
I want something artsy. So literally, I shoot the image. I come back to darkroom. I'm pouring water around the outside of it before I ever put developer on it.
Right.
Try to distress it in the pan before I even get to developing the thing. So he was real happy after like 3 or 4 of those. So very tough movie to work on. Probably the least fun I ever had on a movie set. Because when I was there was when he was breaking up with Jennifer Aniston and started going out with Angelina Jolie.
Yeah.
And paparazzi were like literally hiding in the trees and crawling under fences trying to get a picture of him. And
if I had a nickel,
that was not fun. So I worked on that. Let's see, Into the West, Assassinate Jesse James.
Now, who directed Jesse James?
Andrew, and I can't remember his last name. I'm sorry, Andrew, I forgot your name. But
it's okay. He probably doesn't listen.
He was like an artsy, very artsy.
Sure he's on a Patreon?
He had a very,
probably not.
And it had a very dark look to it, which was really cool.
Oh, I love that movie. No, it's a great movie.
Worked on what was the one with Nicolas Cage? National Treasure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, National Treasure, Book of Secrets. Worked on Harriet.
Now, are you ever depicted as the photographer in
sometimes.
A scene in these movies?
Yeah,
which
sometimes
ones?
So you were in Harriet.
Yeah, Harriet.
Harriet.
I show up for like a 1/10 of a second. You see my hand?
Didn't you
Very prominently
have to
featured.
build a camera specifically for that one?
Yes. Harriet, I had a camera that we built. This one I just got done working on called... hang on. What the heck is that laser?
Oh, Good Lord Bird?
Thank you.
Yeah.
The Good Lord Bird.
Okay.
Ethan Hawke.
Okay.
I'm actually in a scene with Daveed Diggs, who plays Frederick Douglass.
Oh, is this the John Brown
movie?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. I want to see
So I
that.
did a couple pictures on that set, and I created one that day, varnished it, dried it, put it in a case, and it shows up on screen art. So a lot of times what I do is I'll get called for either prop work where, all right, we need original camera, we need a dark room, we need a whole studio, like Into the West, where I outfitted those photographers. I created faux daguerreotypes for the Gold Rush era. And then other times I'll be working as an on-screen photographer, or I'm coaching an on-screen photographer. I just did that for that movie called The Underground Railroad, which is like a sci-fi movie that's going to be on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
So it's actually, I believe, underground or runaway slaves who get like a boring machine and they're building a train and it's what a set.
Like a literal underground.
Oh yeah,
a literal underground train.
Wait till you see this thing.
Okay.
I can't share pictures with it, but my God, it's pretty cool.
All right,
so I did a
right.
bunch of pictures for that and outfitted this guy. And then there's times where, like Dave said, I'll show up as a photographer.
Yeah.
Like I did in Harriet or this other one. So it's fun to be able to fill all those shoes and get called for these specific things. And then you realize that you're the expert. You know the era, you know the photography,
right?
And they call you for that, but that's strictly a guideline, and they're going to do what the heck they want to do anyhow.
Yeah,
and that's okay. I mean, I'm getting hired specifically for a job. I'm not there to criticize. I'm there to try to help them make the best product possible and add my artistic flair to it.
Sure.
So like the Underground Railroad, they said, okay, we're going to do this, and we need the old-fashioned flash. I go, well, it wasn't invented yet. And they said, okay, but how can we do this at night? I says, well, see, you got a train that goes underground in 1860, so I don't think flash is the worst thing that's going to be in this movie.
Right.
If we're just making things up, well,
so we use some, smoke powder and all that stuff, and we made it work.
Right.
You know what I mean? And for 90% of the audience, it's fine.
It's fine.
It's you have to take
98%.
the historian hat and set it aside sometimes to go, you know what? This is entertainment.
Yeah.
And if people enjoy it, that's great. They're not saying this is exactly how it was. If you're really interested in the era, you can find factual things. They're out there.
Yeah.
But
and you're going to get more work if you
I'm getting a check.
Don't argue.
Yeah, I'm getting a check.
And you alluded to it, and I get it here every now and then too. People assume that wet plate photos look 160 years old when you shoot them.
Right.
They should look scratched up,
Yeah.
torn up,
Yeah.
beat up.
They're like,
and
"This
they're
is
like,
too
well,
nice."
this looks too good. Can you beat this up a little bit?
You can.
Scratch it up. I was like, go for it.
Yeah.
And I've had people ask like, hey, can you scuff mine up? So I'll just take
Yeah.
it while it's wet and just drop it on its face and pick it back up again. And that usually puts enough dirt on it.
Right.
Screw it
People
up.
say, well, and then they'll ask me, why do your pictures look old? And I say, they don't look old. They look brand new 150 years ago. There's a difference. Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at the really good Brady photos of like Sherman and those guys.
Yeah.
Those are good
Oh,
photos.
it's great.
That
Those
one
are
of
great
Grant where he's
photos.
standing up with that
Yeah, with the
stabilizer.
headrest behind him.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
I love
Yep.
that picture.
Yeah.
That's outdoors, right? That picture?
No.
No, that's
That's
an
in the
indoor
studio.
one. If you look, he's in this like circular room.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of little windows in there.
It's like you're standing on a big wheel of cheese.
Yeah, pretty much.
that's what I think,
They're
yeah.
kind of shooting because I saw somebody just layered and made a GIF of the shots they did of Custer. So it's a couple different angles, so you can get, like as they go back and forth, you almost get like a 3D of it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know why they just didn't shoot a stereoscope, but
Right.
I wasn't
they were
Yeah.
experimenting with.
There's one of there's a side view of David Farragut too. He's
yes.
kind of sitting there, and he's
Yeah.
in that same domed room, and he's got the stand behind him. So
Where was that common? That type of room, or was that?
I think that
one
wasn't that like a
specific place?
sculptor studio
It
or
was
something?
there's something unique about that room because
Right.
he's standing on a big circle, and there's a lot of angle
Right.
lines.
Yeah.
going
The
in.
wheel of
Yeah.
cheese.
Yeah, there's something going on. It's definitely
Giant
not
pizza.
it's definitely not common. What you commonly see is a painted backdrop,
Right.
Tiled floor or a rug, and pillars or a banister or a chair. Something to there's a look to period studios.
Where was that place? Was that in D.C.?
I believe so.
I think it was
Yeah.
DC. Yeah. Yep.
Fascinating.
How common was outdoor photography at that time? Realistically,
It kind of depended on what you wanted. I always tell reenactors there's kind of three varieties of Civil War photos. There's your studio photos where you're indoors, you're in a studio, you've got all the stuff, all the junk is there. You have outdoor studios where a lot of times these photographers are traveling. They've got a tent with a skylight, or they've just set up a canvas backdrop. They're somewhere in the field, but they've set it up so they have a semblance of a studio, probably just to get consistency in their shots. And then you have your pure field shots. People, they're just capturing whatever
Right.
image is going on around them. You see like all the 1862 Alexandria forts. You've got like the 95th PA or all over the place. You've got all the 114th PA photos, all those just field shots. So they're finding that the more sensational photos are the field photos, the casualty photos, and that's what it starts to trend towards near the end of the war. Beginning of the war, everybody just got their uniforms, they just got their weapons, they all go to a studio, and once they all get out of town, the photographer's like, I still got to capitalize on this,
right.
And they're following the armies anywhere they can.
Yes. And the other ones, the battlefield photographers that Dave's alluded. First of all, you couldn't just go there and decide, all right, I'm going to go out and take these pictures. You had to have a pass.
Right.
Yeah.
And there were only Brady's guys, the Gardner guys, and very few other ones that they would give passes through.
And how would they get those passes?
From the General Headquarters, Army of Potomac.
The
So you just have to go and apply for them.
There's a photo that was being debated on a forum not too long ago, saying something. Oh, this is a Gardner photo that was shot the day of the Antietam battlefield, like the battle's still going on. It didn't happen. He was in D.C. when the battle started.
Right.
It's a one-day battle. Even if somehow the word got to D.C.,
right.
If he had immediately heard it said, let's go, 70 miles to Sharpsburg, that's a several-day trip.
Yeah.
The other thing you have to look at, who's paying for the picture.
Exactly.
Okay. So number one, like Dave said, the studio photographs, camps of training outside of town. These troops just got mustered in. They're off to the studio photographer that's been there and been established for a lot of years.
Right.
They now have bonus money and probably the nicest suit of clothes they ever had.
Right.
So they want to document it. Secondly, they want something to give their loved ones to be remembered by. As he said, the troops get out of town. A lot of these itinerants said, well, I'm going to go with my guys, my local friends and all that. Packed up, got a tent, got a wagon, and they stayed in camps of training for months.
Yeah.
But behind the lines, nowhere near the front lines.
Right.
Then you had the Gardners, the O'Sullivans, Gibsons, the battlefield photographers, which were America's first photojournalists. They were the CNN of the era.
Yep.
And nobody was financing them. The photographers themselves were financing. So when it said photo by Brady, people go, well, he wasn't even there. No, but he paid for the horse. He paid for the wagon. He paid for the chemicals. He paid for the cameras. Just like saying it's a Steven Spielberg film, even though he might not be the guy looking through the camera.
Right.
So when you look at it from that aspect, the credit didn't always go with the cameraman as it did with who was financing all this. And that's why you get these photo by Brady that he was everywhere. He wasn't, but he was financing so much of it. And again, where were these photographs? What was going to be done with them, and who was going to capitalize from the sale of them? This is where Brady had the foresight that I can make multiple prints, and particularly as Dave alludes to with the Antietam photographs, November of 1862, months after the Battle of Antietam, Brady's studio in New York City, he has a small placard in the window downstairs, which I believe was a drugstore at the time.
Okay.
It says, The Dead of Antietam. And people were literally lying down flights of stairs, outdoors, onto the sidewalk, and around the corner to see these horrible little stereoscopic and small albumin prints that were being displayed of the Dead of Antietam. And people were horrified. They had never seen photographs like it before in their lives. It caused an unbelievable sensation where one of the reporters from New York Herald wrote, if Mr. Brady hasn't taken dead bodies and laid them at our dooryards, he's done something very, very much like it. And it was that horrific, and yet still people wanted to see it.
Sure.
And people wanted to buy it. And
car
it was
accident.
the most popular stereo series sold during the entire Civil War.
Oh, people
because they
bought
were the
them?
first dead body photographs.
Yep.
Wow.
Yes.
And what Rob was alluding to, too, people don't realize period photography back then is not big either. You're not going to the Met and you're not seeing, 4 foot by 4 foot photos. Right. They're small little plates.
That's right.
A lot of our most famous photographs are no bigger than like a 4x5.
We're used to seeing them all blown up in a book or on a screen or something like that, but these are tiny little things.
Yeah.
So now, the Dead of Antietam series, are there a lot of great... I mean, I guess it's shocking to see a dead body in a photograph from a battlefield for the person who's never been to war or anything.
Yes.
Death in and of itself wasn't an uncommon thing back then. Everybody died a lot easier than they do today.
Right.
But were there graphic shots like the one here with the guy with the missing abdomen? And
they weren't quite as bad. I mean, one of the most talked about photographs of the Antietam series was the dead horse.
The horse.
Whose bowels are coming out his rear end and
Yeah.
looks like he's ready to he's looking at the camera, I believe, and he's like he's ready to stand up and walk away. And it's just that he looked that lifelike, and that was one picture that people certainly remembered. There were a lot of rigor mortis type photographs with arms in the air
up,
contorted. But number one, you can't photograph the blood. As Dave talked about before, red is going to turn dark colors. And so you're not seeing a lot of those wounds unless somebody's missing a limb or is disemboweled. A gunshot wound, it's going to look like.
But he's not really going and getting close-ups of these guys that maybe haven't been as popular as the group shots. Because I'm trying to think
guys,
if I've
Gardner and Gibson. They arrived there in Antietam. They know they got the scoop of the century, and yet they're still treading lightly because the Southerners are their fellow countrymen.
Right.
You don't want to exploit this too much, but we got to tell the story, and at the end of the day, we got to make money.
Right.
And they're still artists. This is where the line between the documentarian and the artist sort of blend back and forth, and we see that here out at the famous dead sharpshooter photograph taken at Devil's Den, where they drag a body. Photographically, they documented a guy very well at that other group of rocks that was down the hill from, the sharpshooter. But it didn't have that impact. It needed the setting. It needed that great backdrop. And whoever it was, whether it was Gardner or O'Sullivan or Gibson or all three of them, said, my God, this is perfect. We just need a body. Let's go get this guy. Looked like he's sleeping. He probably just died that morning. Had crawled back there in the rocks and bled out eventually. Threw him on a blanket. We actually recreated this for an old History Channel series called The Unknown Civil War, and we dragged him up there. And the other thing that we found out almost by accident, I had an 8x10 camera we were shooting, and there's a rock that's to the left, and you can see in that rock there's almost like a trough, and there's a little puddle of water that had remained there for where it rained the morning before. And as I was lining up that shot with an 1860s Dallmeyer lens, you don't realize how incredibly low you are when you're shooting this. And a lot of people nowadays, it's a great fad and hobby to go out and do these then and now photographs, and they're trying to find where these pictures are taken from, and they're trying to recreate. And they don't realize that a lot of these shots, these guys are like on their knees taking the picture.
They're standing up, trying to hold it up to their cell phone.
Exactly. Because particularly with a stereo shot, you need that distinctive middle ground. You like to have some sort of foreground and that real blurry background. You get that 3D effect, And if you're just looking down at a body like a crime scene photographer in the 1940s, like Ouija with a speed graphic and a big flash, it's not going to look anything like the Harvest of Death with these 5-6 guys lined up, the horseman in the back and the lone rider back there,
I'm glad you brought up the Harvest of Death. I had Scott Hartwig on a couple months ago, and he did his article back in 2011 about what he thinks the Harvest of Death photos are, or where they were taken. I'd like to know what you guys think about his theory that they're out on the first day and they're probably from Biddle's Brigade. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know. It's one of those things that, there aren't a lot of tells in that photograph. There's a lot of sloping areas around here. The people in the photograph don't wear anything real descript. It's all right. Well, it's a handful of guys in just very basic uniforms, and they're laid out and
bloated.
Just a slight grade. That could literally be anywhere around here. It's one of those ones I don't think we're ever going to get the right answer. Same with who are those 3 Confederate prisoners and where are they?
Right.
Could be a lot of places around here.
But the reason it just popped into my head, not just because you said the Harvest of Death, but because you mentioned being low down.
Yes.
And a couple of listeners were in town a few weeks ago, and they asked me to go hang out. So we went out there. They were listening to the Scott Hartwig episode, and they had pictures that they had printed out, and they're out there trying to match everything up and all that stuff. And so I was out there, and I'm like, I go, well, this actually looks like they're a little lower to the ground than we are. We're standing up, and I'm like, so let's get down more. And then all of a sudden the terrain
you
It
changed.
fits more like a puzzle piece when you get the angle that it was shot from.
Yes.
It makes a big difference.
One of the things of the Harvest of Death is so many of these people are looking at these photographs as historians. Right. I'm not into what troops they are, what unit. I'll let others debate all that. That's not my gig. I'm more into the artistic side. What were these guys doing? What were they trying to capture? And why did they shoot the way they do? All right. So knowing that, when you look at the image that is entitled The Harvest of Death, the one with the guy in the front with his mouth wide open, all bloated, grotesque, disgusting looking. All right. As I look at him as the key feature that they're trying to capture, number one is getting clarity of the face. Guy didn't care about the backdrop.
Right.
So looking at the slope of the ground and the angle in which the body was laying, the photographer is trying to line up that body as best as he can. And I believe when he does, to get that body in the correct position as the star of that photograph, as gross as it is, but it is, the background is askewed, which means the camera's tilted on the tripod. So, and one of the giveaways of that, dating back to my old Sam Elliott riding in the movie Gettysburg days, is that the guy that's seated on the horse, that horse looks like he's leaning backwards when you look at the picture. The man's weight is not sitting squarely on the horse. And that puts strains on the horse's back, and the horse don't like it, So right away you're going to try to get to a neutral place where it's not bothering the horse. So to me, again, let's say with my motorcycle terminology, the horse looks like he's ready to do a wheelie. All right? So if you put the horse flat, then you start to see where that landscape isn't quite as skewed as it is, but it's actually the body that's skewed.
The horse.
Yeah.
And you start lining up all these angles. And then you realize that, well, maybe this isn't that weird looking rise that we see. It's more slant on the left. And the other thing that I see, which very few people have had the chance to get at, is when I was down, I did a demo years and years ago for a man named Brooks Johnson, who is a curator at the Chrysler Museum down in Newport News. And they have the finest quality of the Harvest of Death I've ever seen.
Okay.
He scanned it for me.
Okay.
I have that on a disc. And I bring it up on a computer, and without manipulating anything, the first thing I'll do is I will turn that horse where he's straight. Okay?
Yeah.
I'll then take and not worry about the foreground, who Gardner or O'Sullivan, who took this, is worried about capturing that dead soldier
the principal
in
focus,
perfect exposure.
Yeah.
All right? So if you forget about that, say, let's bring up the background as much as we can. You start tweaking the contrast and the brightness on this.
Yes.
And suddenly you see a very specific rectangular shape in dead center in the background.
Okay.
Which is a man-made object. And I believe it's a barn.
Okay.
And it's hiding there in plain sight. And I think as you start to look at all these different things, you're going to realize that the reason why we can't find it is because it's something as maybe as obvious as the Emmitsburg Road, and it's one of the barns in the background. And you get, let's say, across from the Trossel farm, and you see that rise go up on the left and a little swell, and it starts to look like, okay, maybe this isn't some weird elusive place. Maybe it's right where they came up from Emmitsburg. We know that.
Yep.
Maybe
this is the
first place.
Yep.
The first place they photographed. Maybe the barn is no longer there. Maybe it's the Rose Barn, but it's somewhere in that area. And that's
Maybe
where
it's
I
the
agree
Rogers
with
house.
Gary
Could be.
Edelman and those guys that it was taken out there. And I've always thought it's been taken out there. Scott Hartwig and his theory has a lot of credit to it.
Sure.
We don't know what wagon road they went down or how they came here. And until somebody finds, I think the missing piece is going to be some sort of written manuscript that said, I rode with the photographer's day from Emmitsburg, and we arrived on, the first day's part of the field or, the southern end of wherever. And that's going to be the clue. It's not going to be the photograph. It's going to be something that's written that's going to give it away.
If I give you my email, would you send me that scan? Because
Sure.
I'd love to explore that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
Yep.
Yeah, because that's the problem, is finding a good scan of it, of like a high quality picture where you could really, because you look at a copy, like a photocopy that's put in a book.
Right.
And that's not good.
And the other thing, too, like I said, the star is the dead body.
Yeah.
That's what they're exposing it for. They're not worried about the background. The last thing he's doing is sitting there with a level on his camera going, all right, I have to get this architecturally perfect.
Right.
And I've had people say, well, that horseman isn't really there. He's drawn in. I said, no, maybe you saw a fourth or fifth generation copy where he is drawn in. But you look at the first generation print from this, he's absolutely there. Both those guys are. Gardner could care less about drawing in some guy on a horse way off in the background, when he had those 5 dead bodies there.
Now, I mean, this must have been explored, but it's not possible that maybe this was mistakenly thrown in to the Gettysburg collection, and it's actually someplace completely different.
I doubt that. They were pretty good about documenting that kind of stuff. If anything that I've ever run into, the Victorians were fantastic about documentation.
Okay.
Everything, and that's why when you get in arguments about post-mortem stuff, and they used posing stands to hold up a dead body. Couldn't hold anybody up. Yeah. No. And if they were doing that, they would have documented it. They documented literally everything.
Yeah.
The fact that you can't find any period source material on it, that should be a dead giveaway from that period.
I mean, the one thing I do know about the Harvest of Death is I don't know. I wasn't there.
Right.
And neither was anybody else. And these guys that are ready to go to battle are saying, "Oh, it's here. It's not there." How do they know?
Yeah, exactly.
I know what I know about the process, and I know, what I do about the way a photograph will look, and probably about what's going through the guy's mind when he's taking this picture, and he's going, "All right, these are Union dead. We got to be real respectful when we do this, but damn, this is an awesome photograph. We got to shoot this."
Yep.
And they're lining up, doing as quickly as they can, and then they turn around, they go to do the reverse, and there's the grave digger standing there. And okay, can you just give us a second, guys? The plate's almost ready. Hold on, he's getting the plate right now. Yeah, just stand to the side right there. All right, here, we'll be just a second. And these guys are going, hurry the hell on. Let's go. We got
don't
a job
this job
to do
anyway.
And this is sort of creepy, sort of disrespectful. We don't care if they were rebels, but these are our own guys. And hurries up, takes the plate, gets out of there. Those guys are digging holes to drag bodies right away.
And Rob, I'm sure you've had the same thing when you're shooting a really interesting topic. You don't really care where the horizon is. It's the least of your,
You're
I've shot all
manipulating
kinds
the
of cool
camera.
stuff where, my horizon's on a full angle.
That's right.
And sometimes that's what makes it even really better than
And
what
again,
you originally
you talk about documenting, but these guys are artists.
Yeah.
And I know me, it's like you might chicken scratch something on a plate and that's it. It's like, no, it's that's not how my mind works. I'm the visual guy.
Right.
I'm all about, capturing that image. And actually, when you look at Gardner's catalog of the Gettysburg images, Bob Zeller had brought this up, where they pretty much dole out credit, just whose ever turn it was to have credit for that picture. So you see, actually, Gardner, O'Sullivan, Gibson, Gardner, O'Sullivan, Gibson,
So
Gardner,
it's like
O'Sullivan,
Lennon
Gibson.
McCartney.
Right. And
Whoever writes the song, it doesn't matter. They both get the credit.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but when you think about it, who did create that photograph? Was it O'Sullivan that lined up the camera? Was it James Gibson that was so skillful in the darkroom that poured the plate and developed it perfectly? Was it Alexander Gardner who assembled all these guys and then turned the camera around to get the reverse? So when you start looking at it, you realize it's a team effort.
Right. Yep.
And that individual photo credit doesn't mean as much as it does today. It's not like Robert Capa on D-Day crawling out of a landing craft and
doing it all himself.
Going out taking pictures on Omaha Beach. This is much different.
Sure.
Well, there's been several times I've gone out with our mutual friend Alex Martin. He's got a fantastic eye, a better eye than me, and I'll do the darkroom chemicals. He'll do, he'll line up the shot. It's a Victorian photography photo, but.
But you're not the one that took it.
I may not be the one who lined it up, but I did all the chemistry.
Yeah. And he paid for the gig, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he bankrolled it.
Yeah, I mean, there's if Rob and I ever shoot together, he's got a great eye for that kind of stuff, a little better than me. I'll do the dark room. He can line it up.
Or maybe I want to do dark room.
Yeah,
let him line it up.
Dark room.
Let him carry the camera.
Yeah.
So Rob, how do people, if they want to hire you, how do they get a hold of you?
Best thing is through email. tintypeartist@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook, Rob Gibson or RJ Gibson Photographer. I am in the midst of creating a new website, which will be tintypeartist.com. I'm really good at the 1860s stuff. It's the modern stuff that I lack at. So I'll be the first to admit my Instagram and website stuff isn't as up to date as it should be, But there's those that are great promoters and bad photographers. I'm a great photographer and a bad promoter, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
well, you can only focus on one, you know. And promoting yourself it's a weird thing.
It is.
You got to be willing to do it.
Sometimes you just have, there's a handful. I follow a lot of modern tintype artists on Instagram, and and some of them just are not very good. But
as tin typers, or as
their focus won't be very good, or their chemicals will be real bad. They'll be way overexposed or way overdeveloped, or there's a guy I don't even follow him because they're just not good, but he must use pond water or something. These things just look horrible,
really.
But people love them because they're artistic.
And he puts them out there. Sometimes that's all you got to do. I mean, I always said, like, if Bob Dylan could have a career singing, and it's just about getting yourself out there.
I did a tintype of Bob Dylan, actually.
I think I saw that.
Across the Green Mountain. That was pretty cool.
I've seen some photos that, I mean, they'd go straight into the recycling bin for me, but people, it's beautiful, such artists, it looks so great.
One man's trash is another man's treasure.
I got to just shoot
the
worse
Emperor's
plates
new clothes. It's like, okay, buddy, you think that's great? God bless you.
I remember I sold a painting one time and I hated it. I thought it was like the worst thing. I was so disappointed in it. I had such a big vision in my head of what it would be, and then I did it and I was like, oh, this is awful. But my friend had a cafe and he needed some stuff for the wall. I'm like, here, take this thing. And then like 2 days later, he calls me. He's like, this lady wants to know how much you want for that painting.
Oh my God, that's
and I'm
great.
like, really?
Wow.
So I gave her a ridiculous price and she took it. And I was like, all right,
deal. Yeah.
Very cool.
$20 million later.
There you go.
All right. So, Dave, and your information once again, how do people...
you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. Facebook, I'm Victorian Photography Studio. Instagram, I'm at VPS_Gettysburg. I'm doing all kinds of random stuff right now. Send me photos of your pets. I'll shoot them as tintypes. Pick a monument. I'll go shoot it for you. I'm doing socially distant portraiture. I'm starting what's called front portraiture.
I saw that.
So we'll, find some people in your town who are interested in this. You guys can split the travel fee. I'll show up to your spot and just shoot your photos right on your front porch.
Yeah, that's great. That's cool.
It works. People aren't coming here, so I got to go there.
Right. There you go. And Rob, if people see you riding around on the battlefield, you're not equipped and ready to go.
Oh, yes.
You are?
I got everything with me. Usually 90% of the time I do.
So then people could say, oh, you're Rob Gibson. Could you take a shot of us right here in front of the 69th PA or whatever?
I just photographed two friends yesterday that just happened to be walking around at...
I saw your shot of Chris. That was really good. Yeah.
Chris Jones, who works here, and he's also in his real life. He's a carpenter, and he helped me out at my new place, putting in a shower unit and doing some remodeling for me. So I knew I owed him a shot, and he was looking all dapper, and I was like, "Hey, man, come on, I'll do a picture of you." So him and his buddy Rick, I photographed yesterday, and that was just sort of spur of the moment. So. Sometimes those are the most fun because you just come across people and
it's spontaneous. And, Well, all right.
I've had that where I'll set up somewhere, set up a pop-up area, and I'm there for some specific appointments. But people will come up, they want to see the process. They're just fascinated.
I was with you one time and people like that whole family. Remember they came over by the peach orchard.
Yep.
We were with the great Steve Fan and
Oh yeah. I saw that. That was
you stopped by that
spectacular
day.
image.
Even Rob
with Steve.
stopped by.
As I saw that with the little Facebook thing with the 3D image. That was a great picture. I love that photograph where he's leaning against the cannon.
That was the one that was over
great.
on Cemetery Hill.
I love that picture. That was a great shot of him.
It's very Steve. He's definitely got some McClellan in him.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
Oh yeah, debonair. That's a good word.
I think that's one thing about Dave and I is we both have this mutual respect, and even though we do sort of compete in a little bit, but mostly it's he does his thing, I do my thing, and he's helped me out tremendously his last couple of years when it comes to getting supplies and that sort of thing, and loaning out wardrobe or whatever. And he knows he can come to me for specific things, and I'll always try to help him out any way I can. So very much like the photographers of the era, and even back in the 1860s, a lot of Southern photographers were out of business because they could no longer get chemistry. And some of the Northern guys were like, here, guys, here's some... because a lot of that stuff was used in also the medical field.
Yeah.
So
And same as today.
Yes.
A lot of the stuff that we need is used in the medical field, and that's where I get some of it.
Yeah,
exactly.
There's a lot of people clamoring to get potassium cyanide, and our source is pretty much
because
told
they're
us
sick
not
of the
to,
shutdown and they want to drink it.
I don't know. I don't have no idea why.
Oh, okay. Because that's why I want to.
A lot of photographers are looking for it. Because there's a lot of people. Potassium cyanide does give a better finish to it when you're using that hypo
it's
stuff.
More pop, It's a lot more brighter whites, darker blacks, you know. So it certainly has more of that. I mean, I've taken stuff looks like 1940s film, you know what I mean? If I wanted to, where it has that much contrast, where a lot of the stuff looks very veiled and gray, you know, there's no specific mid-tones or it looks like to me a lot of stuff came off of 1970s copy machines. Black and white photographs. There they are. They're
and
black
it's literally
and white.
just black and white.
Right, exactly.
There's nothing in between. No, I think that's cool that you guys are, like you said, kind of in competition, but not to the point where you're enemies. And
right.
Oh, not at all.
There's no sense for us to be straight up
plus
competitors.
we each have cyanide, so that can get really ugly.
There's a lot of things that people ask me to do that I can't, or it's in Rob's wheelhouse, and I send them to Rob. You want your vintage car done?
Right.
I know a guy.
Yeah.
I can't go do it for you.
And I'll send families up there because I don't have wardrobe anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't have the space
Oh, there
to
you
do
go.
it.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
I find
and it's funny is we'll both send babies down the street to old time photos. It's like, oh no, screaming kid, go down there.
Yeah,
those screaming kid photos are down there.
Yep.
Go down to the digital camera. But that's cool though. I mean, I think it is. I don't know. You attract more flies with honey if you just work together and things. And don't look at everybody's competition.
Why should we both pay for shipping on tin? It's coming to the same place.
Right. Exactly.
I'll order 40 sheets instead of 20.
Yeah. Do some kind of co-op thing. Well, anyway, guys, thank you very much for doing this. Rob, it was great sitting talking to you.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks
Dave,
so much
always a pleasure.
Of course.
One thing before we go, we didn't ask you. What are your thoughts on Jenny Wade? Did she die, or was she swept away by
I don't know.
Wesley Culp?
It's funny because moving down here as a New Yorker, and I've got to hit up a lot of pizza places, a lot of sub shops, and the bread stinks down here compared to New York.
We could do an hour on this.
I think actually it was a disgruntled guy that. Man, she was making some terrible bread.
It was a New York guy.
Had enough, yeah. That's what I think happened. Yeah, it's like, this bread down here sucks. I'm shooting her.
Yep.
That was it.
No,
don't take that personally, folks. Don't send any cards or letters. Strictly a joke, but
oh, that's funny. I never thought. See, that's
another one.
Take this and run
with it.
Yeah.
That's our new.
We got to incorporate that into our overall conspiracy theory somehow. That's great.
But the Amish, they can't make a good pizza to save their life.
No, they can't. They can't. Absolutely not. No, but the good pizza's hard to find.
You got to go to Chicago.
Especially being from New York or New Jersey.
York.
Yeah, see, this guy thinks it's Chicago.
Oh, it's hands down Chicago.
No, it's New York.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not even just talking about
New York,
deep,
and that's where I think
dish,
the best pizza in the world
Well, is this sauce
great.
sweet there?
Yes.
Oh, see, that's... Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah,
no,
I
I'm
love it.
from the New York City area.
Oh, yeah.
And
I do like the foldable slice, so you got to have that. You got to have a nice crunch on it.
The Jersey Shore, one slice is like this big.
Yeah.
And
Takes
you
up the whole paper plate.
and it's like a calzone.
So when are we doing the pizza show next?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll
Let's just take a pee break and then we'll do the pizza show right after this. No, anyway, thanks guys very much for doing this, and we'll have you on again and do other stuff.
Great. Sounds
good. Be a lot of fun.
It was an honor. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
You do us the honor. Thank you very much, and thank you all for listening. And that's it.